The house on Maple Street. Sarah had just moved into the old house on Maple Street. It was a charming little two-story, with ivy creeping up the brick facade and a wide porch that seemed to invite her to sit and enjoy the evening breeze. The neighbors spoke highly of it, too, told her she was lucky to have found a place so well-priced in a neighborhood that was only just beginning to be revitalized. It was the kind of home that, at first glance, seemed to hold the promise of new beginnings. But something was off. Sarah tried to ignore the oddities. The floorboards creaked, especially in the upstairs hallway. The light in the attic flickered every time she passed the staircase, and the trees outside always cast long shadows across the yard, even at midday. She chalked it up to her overactive imagination. Moving into a new place, she figured, could do that to a person. The first strange occurrence happened just a week after she moved in. She had just finished unpacking when she heard a soft knock on the front door. No one was supposed to come by, she hadn't told anyone her new address yet. Curious, she opened it. A woman stood on the porch, thin and pale, with disheveled hair and a long, gray dress. Her eyes were distant, almost blank, and her voice was low when she spoke. "Do you feel it?" Sarah hesitated. "Feel what?" "The house," the woman said, her eyes narrowing. "It's hungry. It doesn't like being alone." Before Sarah could respond, the woman turned and walked down the porch steps, disappearing around the corner of the house. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, unsure of whether she should be concerned or if she had just encountered a neighborhood eccentric. As the evening wore on, the odd feeling of unease settled over Sarah. The air in the house felt thicker than before, and it became increasingly harder to shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching her. That night, she decided to get some rest. But just as she was drifting off to sleep, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside her bedroom door. Heavy and deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth. Sarah sat up in bed, heart racing. She listened, straining her ears. The footsteps continued, but when she opened her bedroom door, the hallway was empty. Nothing but the dim, flickering light from the old lamp at the end of the corridor. The next few days were a blur of anxiety. The footsteps persisted, louder at times, as though they were right outside her door. The feeling of being watched never went away. The house had an oppressive quality to it now, as if it had a life of its own, one that grew more restless with each passing hour. It wasn't long before Sarah began to notice other strange things. The windows in the kitchen would be fogged up on mornings she hadn't touched them the night before. Dishes would be slightly moved, as though someone had been there. And one night, when she was in the attic looking for her old winter coats, she found an old, dusty trunk hidden behind a pile of forgotten boxes. She opened it. Inside was a pile of yellowed papers, old journals, brittle with age. She began flipping through them, reading the entries aloud in the dim attic light. "There is a coldness here. I feel it in my bones. The house knows me, it wants me." The journals belonged to someone who had lived there long before Sarah, someone named Agnes. The entries were full of similar cryptic phrases, detailing the slow erosion of Agnes's sanity. The house, it's not just a house. It's a prison. A keeper of souls. The last entry was more disturbing than the rest. "I hear it now, the footsteps. They don't stop. They follow me." Suddenly, Sarah froze. She had heard the footsteps, too. Before she could react, a loud bang echoed from downstairs. Sarah slammed the trunk shut and rushed down the stairs, her heart thumping in her chest. The house was silent. But not for long. There, in the kitchen, the lights flickered violently, and a shadow moved across the walls. It wasn't a human figure. It was wrong. A shape that didn't belong. Sarah backed away, her breath catching in her throat. "Help, please," she whispered. The shadow seemed to grow larger, then shifted into a darker form, a figure, no longer just a shadow, but something solid, something human. It moved toward her, slow, deliberate. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice said, rasping, like dry leaves being crumpled. Sarah stumbled back, knocking over a chair as she tried to run. The figure's eyes gleamed, glowing with an unnatural light. The house groaned as though in response to her fear, the walls pulsing like they were alive. "Why?" Sarah managed to choke out. The figure stopped just inches from her, its face twisted into something grotesque, its skin pale and taut. "Because it wants you," it hissed. "You're the one it's been waiting for." In that moment, Sarah realized with horrifying clarity that the house itself wasn't just a structure, it was a trap. A trap that fed on the souls of those who dared to live in it. It had claimed Agnes, and now it wanted her. The figure reached out with cold fingers, grasping her wrist with terrifying strength. She screamed, struggling to break free, but the grip was unyielding. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls shifting, warping with the sound of creaking wood and groaning beams. "Please," Sarah begged, her voice barely a whisper now. "I didn't mean to." But it was too late. The house had already claimed her. The next morning, the neighbors noticed something strange. The house on Maple Street was quiet, too quiet. The lights never turned on, the curtains never moved. Sarah was gone, vanished without a trace. And the house? It stood there, as it always had, waiting. Hungry. Some say if you walk by at night, you can hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing from within, pacing endlessly, forever seeking the next soul to claim.